The dust coated Amelia Foster's boots as she stumbled across the cracked earth. Two wooden buckets suspended from the yoke across her shoulders, water sloshing with each labored step. She took toward the weathered cabin that sat alone on the ridge overlooking Cowboy, Colorado. It was 1882, and the summer sun beat down mercilessly on the high desert terrain surrounding the small mining town, turning every journey to the creek 5 miles distant into an ordeal that consumed half her day. Her father had staked his claim here 3 years ago, convinced the silver veins would make them rich, but he had died of fever last winter, leaving Amelia alone with debts she could not pay and land she could not leave. She was 20 years old, though her hands looked older, calloused and cracked from the ropes and the constant work. Her dark hair hung in a braid down her back, and her simple cotton dress, faded from washing and sun, clung to her thin frame. The yoke dug into her shoulders through the padding she had fashioned from old blankets, and still the pain was sharp enough to make her eyes water. But she did not stop. She never stopped. Without water, she would die, and she had not survived the winter alone just to give up now. The cabin finally came into view as she crested the last hill, and Amelia allowed herself a moment to rest, setting the buckets down carefully so as not to spill a single drop. Her shoulders screamed with relief as she rolled them, trying to work out the knots. In the distance, she could see Cowboy nestled in the valley, a cluster of buildings huddled together where the roads converged. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from here she could imagine the sounds, the voices, the life happening there. She rarely went to town anymore. There was no time, and besides, the looks she received from the other women, the pity mixed with judgment, made her stomach twist. A lone rider appeared on the road below, moving at an easy pace toward her property. Amelia tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for the rifle she had left leaning against a rock. Out here, alone, she had learned to be cautious. Men sometimes rode up thinking a woman by herself would be easy prey, but her father had taught her to shoot, and she had fired warning shots more than once. This rider, though, did not veer toward her cabin. He seemed to be surveying the land, his gaze sweeping across the scrub brush and rocky outcroppings. She watched him for a moment longer, noting the confident way he sat his horse, the broad shoulders beneath his work shirt, the hat pulled low against the sun. Then she picked up her buckets again, ignoring the protest of her muscles, and made the final trek to her cabin. The water needed to be stored, rationed carefully. She used it for drinking, cooking, washing when she could spare it. The vegetable garden she had tried to maintain had withered despite her best efforts, and the single scrawny chicken she owned looked at her reproachfully each day as if demanding more. Inside the cabin, the air was stifling. Amelia poured water into the large ceramic jug she kept covered with cloth, then allowed herself a single dipperful to drink. The cool liquid sliding down her parched throat was heaven, and she closed her eyes, savoring it. Then she set about preparing a simple meal of beans and the last of her bread. Tomorrow she would have to bake again, which meant heating the cabin even more, but there was no help for it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Amelia sat on the porch her father had built, watching the colors bleed across the horizon. This was her favorite time of day, when the heat finally eased and the world seemed to soften. She thought about her mother, who had died when Amelia was 12, and wondered what advice she would give now. Her mother had been practical, strong, but she had also believed in hope, in the possibility of better days. Amelia wanted to believe too, but it was getting harder. The next morning she woke before dawn, as always, and began the long walk to the creek. Her body ached before she even started, but she ignored it. Pain had become such a constant companion that she barely registered it anymore. The yoke settled into the familiar grooves on her shoulders, and she set out, her feet finding the path by memory more than sight in the dim pre-dawn light. She was halfway to the creek when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Amelia turned, her heart rate quickening, and saw the same rider from yesterday approaching. He slowed as he neared, then stopped his horse a respectful distance away. In the growing light, she could see him more clearly now. He was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was tanned and weathered from outdoor work, but there was a gentleness in his expression that made her relax slightly. "Morning, miss," he said, his voice low and courteous. He did not move closer, keeping his hands visible on the reins. "Name is Nathan Jameson. I work for the Double R Ranch down in the valley." "I know the ranch," Amelia said cautiously. The Double R was one of the largest cattle operations in the area, sprawling across thousands of acres. "What brings you up this way?" Nathan shifted in his saddle, and she noticed the way his gaze took in her buckets, the yoke across her shoulders, the dirt path stretching behind and ahead of her. "I have been riding fence lines for the past few days, checking the grazing lands. Yesterday I saw you carrying water, and this morning I saw you heading out again." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "That is a long walk to make every day." "It is the walk I have," Amelia said, lifting her chin slightly. She did not need pity, especially not from a stranger. "The creek is 5 miles. 5 miles each way," Nathan said quietly. 10 miles a day carrying that weight, I manage. I am sure you do." He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair, and she saw that his fingers were scarred, the hands of a man who worked hard. "But there might be an easier way. Have you ever considered digging a well?" Amelia almost laughed, but it came out bitter. "With what money? With what equipment? I can barely keep food on my table, let alone hire men to dig a well." She turned away, adjusting the yoke. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Jameson, but I need to get to the creek before the day gets too hot." "Wait." He swung down from his horse in one fluid motion, landing lightly despite his size. "I was not suggesting you hire anyone. I was thinking I could dig it for you." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Why would you do that?" Nathan looked at her steadily, and she saw no guile in his face, no hidden calculation. "Because you need it. Because it is not right that you should have to break your back every day just to survive. And because I know how to dig a well and I have the time to do it. You do not even know me." "No, madam, I do not. But I know what it is like to struggle. I know what it is like to need help and have no one offer it." He settled his hat back on his head. "My parents died when I was 16. Cholera left me and my younger sister with nothing. A man in Wyoming took us in, taught me ranching, gave us a chance. I have always figured I should pay that forward when I can." Amelia felt her throat tighten. She wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her pride and her independence, but the truth was she was desperate. Her shoulders were getting worse, the pain sometimes so intense she could barely sleep. And the water shortage meant she was living on the edge of survival, one mishap away from disaster. "I cannot pay you," she said finally. "I have nothing to give. I am not asking for payment." "Then why?" He smiled then, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less careworn. "Maybe I just want to help. Is that so hard to believe?" She studied him for a long moment, this stranger who had ridden into her life offering salvation. There had to be a catch, some expectation she was not seeing, but looking into his eyes, she found only sincerity. "It would take weeks," she said slowly. "Maybe longer. I have evenings and Sundays off. I can work then." Nathan glanced toward her property on the ridge. "I will need to survey the land first, figure out the best spot." Water table should be good up there, plenty of runoff from the mountains. With luck, we might not have to dig too deep. Amelia felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. If you are serious about this, Mr. Jameson, then yes. Yes, I would be grateful for a well. I am serious. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she shook it. His palm was warm and rough against hers, his grip firm but not crushing. I will ride up this evening with some equipment, start surveying. In the meantime, let me help you with those buckets. I can manage. I know you can. But you do not have to. Before she could protest further, he had taken the yoke from her shoulders, settling it across his own. The relief was so immediate and overwhelming that Amelia nearly gasped. She had been carrying that weight for so long that its absence felt strange, almost unsettling. Nathan started walking toward the creek, and she fell into step beside him, hyper-aware of his presence, the long stride that he slowed to match her pace, the easy confidence in the way he moved. "How long have you been living alone up there?" he asked as they walked. "Since December." "My father died of fever." She wrapped her arms around herself despite the growing heat. "He was all the family I had left. I am sorry." The words were simple, but they carried genuine sympathy. This country is hard on people living alone, hard enough even with help. "I have considered leaving," Amelia admitted, surprising herself with the confession. "But I have nowhere to go, and this land, it was my father's dream. Leaving feels like abandoning him all over again." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that. My sister, Clara, she felt the same way about our parents' homestead in Wyoming. Wanted to stay even though we could not work it alone. Sometimes, though, holding on to a dream means adapting it, changing it to fit new circumstances." They reached the creek, a shallow ribbon of water winding between rocks and scrub willows. Nathan knelt and filled the buckets with practiced efficiency, then stood and settled the yoke back across his shoulders. "I will walk you back," he said, cutting off her protest before she could voice it. "It is not out of my way." The walk back seemed shorter with company. Nathan asked about her father's claim, about the land and what she had tried to grow, and Amelia found herself talking more freely than she had in months. There was something about him that invited confidence, a quiet steadiness that made her feel safe. When they reached her cabin, he set the buckets down on the porch and surveyed the property with a critical eye. "You have good elevation here," he said. "Wind breaks from those rock formations. If we can get you water and maybe help with the garden, you could make this place work." That is a lot of ifs, maybe so, but nothing wrong with planning for the best instead of the worst. He touched the brim of his hat. "I will be back this evening, Miss Foster. We will find you water." Amelia watched him ride away, her mind spinning. She did not know what to make of Nathan Jameson, this cowboy who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had been too tired to voice. Part of her waited for the other shoe to drop, for him to reveal his true intentions. But another part, the part that remembered her mother's faith in goodness, wanted to believe he meant exactly what he said. True to his word, Nathan returned that evening as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. He brought tools, a divining rod, and a cheerful determination that seemed impervious to doubt. Amelia came out to meet him, and together they walked her property while he studied the land with focused attention. "Water moves underground following the slope of the surface," he explained, his eyes scanning the terrain. "We want high enough ground that you will not get flooding during spring melt, but not so high that we have to dig through solid rock. And we need to be reasonably close to your cabin so hauling water is not a burden." He stopped near a flat area about 50 yards from her porch, where a slight depression in the earth hinted at underground moisture. Taking the divining rod, a Y-shaped piece of willow, He held it loosely in his hands and walked slowly back and forth. Amelia had heard of water witching but had never seen it done. She watched, skeptical but hoping, as Nathan paced the ground. The rod dipped sharply, pulling downward with enough force that she could see his hands tighten to maintain his grip. He marked the spot with a stone, then continued his survey, cross-checking the area. Each time he passed over the same location, the rod dipped again. Finally, he looked up at her, grinning. "We have water here. I would bet my pay on it." "How deep?" Amelia asked, her heart pounding. "Hard to say for certain until we start digging, but I am guessing 20 to 30 feet. That is manageable." He planted a stake in the ground to mark the exact spot. "I will start digging tomorrow evening. It will take time, but we will get there." Over the following days, a pattern developed. Nathan would arrive each evening after his work at the ranch, sometimes still dusty from riding herd, and he would dig. Amelia tried to help, but he insisted the digging was too dangerous for her to work in the hole. Instead, she hauled away the dirt he excavated, using it to build up berms around her garden plot. She also began cooking extra at supper time, and though Nathan initially protested, she insisted. "You are working yourself to exhaustion for me," she said firmly the third evening, when he tried to refuse the plate she offered. "The least I can do is feed you. I will not hear another word about it." He accepted the food with a grateful smile, and they sat together on her porch as the stars emerged overhead. That became another pattern, those evening conversations after the work was done, when exhaustion softened their defenses and the darkness made it easier to share truths. Nathan told her about growing up in Wyoming, about his sister Clara, who had married a shopkeeper in Denver and was expecting her first child. He spoke of the early days after his parents' death, the hunger and fear, and the kindness of the rancher who had taken them in. "I learned that people can surprise you," he said one night, his voice quiet in the darkness. "When my parents died, I thought the world was nothing but cruelty. But then Ben, the rancher, he taught me that one person can make all the difference. He did not have to help us. We were not kin, just two kids with nothing to offer. But he saw us as human beings who needed help, and he gave it. Changed the whole course of my life." Amelia drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "That must be why you are helping me." "Partly," Nathan admitted. "But there is more to it than that." He turned to look at her, and even in the dim light from the cabin window, she could see the intensity in his gaze. "From the first moment I saw you, walking that long road with those buckets, something in my chest just twisted. You looked so determined, so strong, but also so alone. I could not stop thinking about you, about what you must go through every single day. I had to do something." Her breath caught. "Nathan." "I am not expecting anything," he said quickly. "I want you to know that. Whether you ever feel anything for me beyond gratitude or friendship, I will still dig this well. I will still help you. But I would be lying if I said I did not hope that maybe, someday, you might see me as more than just the cowboy who dug your well." Amelia's heart was racing. She had been so focused on survival that she had not allowed herself to think about feelings, about the way her pulse quickened when she heard his horse approaching, or how she found herself watching the road in the late afternoons, waiting. But now, hearing his words, she could not deny the truth any longer. "I already do," she whispered. "See you as more, I mean. I was afraid to admit it, afraid to want something that might disappear." Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting. "I am not going anywhere, Amelia, not unless you send me away." "I will not send you away." They sat like that for a long while, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. It felt momentous, this admission, this small gesture of connection. Amelia had been alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for, to matter to someone. The knowledge that Nathan saw her, truly saw her, and wanted to build something with her, filled spaces inside her she had not known were empty. The work on the well continued. Nathan was down 20 feet when he hit the first layer of water-bearing gravel. He came up grinning, soaked from the waist down, and announced that they were close. Another week of digging, reinforcing the walls with stones he carefully fitted together, and then he hit the aquifer proper. Water flowed into the bottom of the well, clear and cold and abundant. Amelia cried when she saw it, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. "We need to let it settle, make sure the flow is consistent," Nathan said, but he was grinning too, clearly proud of what they had accomplished. "Then we will build a proper wellhead, install a pump." "But the hard part is done, Amelia. You have water." She threw her arms around him without thinking, and after a moment of surprise, his arms came around her, strong and sure. He smelled of earth and sweat and something uniquely him, and Amelia buried her face against his chest, overwhelmed by gratitude and something deeper, something that felt like the beginning of love. "Thank you," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Thank you does not seem like enough, but I do not have better words." Nathan's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, his fingers gentle against her hair. "You do not need better words. This, right here, this is enough." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, and Amelia felt something fundamental shift inside her. She had been so focused on surviving alone that she had forgotten what it meant to let someone in, to trust and be vulnerable. But Nathan had proven himself, day after day, showing up and doing the work and asking for nothing in return. He was a good man, the kind her mother had always told her to look for, and Amelia wanted to hold on to him with both hands. Over the next 2 weeks, Nathan built the wellhead. He constructed a sturdy wooden frame around the opening, installed a pulley system for drawing water, and fitted a pump he had ordered from a supplier in Denver. The pump was second-hand but functional, and when he primed it and water gushed out of the spout, Amelia laughed with pure delight. No more 10-mile walks, no more aching shoulders and rationed water. She could drink her fill, water her garden, even wash properly. It was nothing short of a miracle. "Now we work on the garden," Nathan announced. "With reliable water, you can grow enough food to keep yourself fed and have surplus to sell in town. Maybe keep a few more chickens, a milk cow if you can manage it. You could make this place really prosper, Amelia." They worked together in the cooler evening hours, tilling the soil, mixing in compost Nathan brought from the ranch, planting seeds and seedlings. Amelia's garden began to transform, rows of vegetables pushing up through the earth, leaves unfurling toward the sun. She had never seen anything so beautiful. Nathan also repaired her chicken coop, making it secure against predators, and helped her acquire 3 more hens from a farmer in town. Suddenly, Amelia had eggs to eat and trade, another small step toward stability. But more than the practical improvements, there was the growing closeness between them. Nathan came to her cabin every evening now, not just to work, but because they wanted to be near each other. They talked endlessly, sharing stories and dreams and fears. He told her about his hopes to someday have his own ranch, a small spread where he could raise horses and cattle without answering to anyone else. She confessed her secret love of reading, showing him the small shelf of books her mother had cherished, and he listened with genuine interest as she described her favorite stories. One evening in late August, as they sat together watching the sun set, Nathan took her hand and said, "I am falling in love with you, Amelia. I think I have been since that first morning when I saw you walking that road. You are the strongest, most determined person I have ever met, but you are also kind and hopeful despite everything you have been through. I want to be part of your life, not just as the man who dug your well, but as a partner, as someone you can rely on always." Amelia turned to him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I am falling in love with you too. I fought it at first, afraid to trust, afraid to hope. But you have shown me over and over that you are exactly who you say you are. You dug me a well, Nathan, but you have given me so much more than water. You have given me back my life." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch reverent, and kissed her softly. It was her first kiss, and it was everything she had imagined and more, sweet and tender and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes, the wonder and joy and slight disbelief that something so right could happen to them. "I want to court you properly," Nathan said. "I want to do this right. I will talk to my boss about building a cabin on the ranch, start saving money. In a year, maybe 2, I could have enough to buy some land of my own. And if you would have me, if you would be willing to wait that long, I would like to ask you to marry me." "You do not have to wait a year to ask," Amelia said, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. "I already know my answer." Nathan's expression transformed, hope blazing bright in his eyes. "Then I am asking now. Amelia Foster, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life building a future with you?" "Yes." The word came out fierce and certain, no hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Amelia felt like she was soaring. Everything she had endured, all the pain and loneliness and struggle, had led her to this moment, to this man who had literally moved earth and stone to give her water and hope. She had thought she was alone in the world, but Nathan had proven that wrong. She had a partner now, someone who saw her strength and cherished her vulnerability, someone who would stand beside her no matter what challenges came. They were married in October, when the aspens on the mountainsides had turned to gold, and the air carried the first hint of winter cold. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church in Auray with Nathan's ranching friends and a few townspeople in attendance. Amelia wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Nathan had bought her, pale blue cotton with lace at the collar, and she carried wildflowers picked from her own garden. Nathan wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle. The preacher spoke about partnership and commitment, about weathering storms together and building a life on faith and hard work. When it came time for the vows, Nathan's voice was steady and strong. "I promise to honor you, to protect you, to work alongside you in whatever comes. I promise to dig wells when you need water, to build walls when you need shelter, to hold you when you need comfort. I promise to love you with everything I have, every day of my life." Amelia's voice shook but did not falter. "I promise to stand with you, to trust you, to share both the burdens and the joys. I promise to build a home with you, a life filled with love and hope. I promise to never stop fighting for us, for the future we are creating together. I promise to love you completely, always." They exchanged simple gold bands, all they could afford, but to Amelia they were more precious than any treasure. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her in front of everyone, a declaration of love and commitment that made her heart soar. The small gathering cheered, and for a moment, Amelia felt embraced not just by Nathan but by a community that had finally accepted her as one of their own. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. The ranchers had brought food, and there was music and dancing in the church hall. Nathan's sister Clara had traveled from Denver, her belly round with her pregnancy, and she hugged Amelia fiercely, whispering, "Thank you for making my brother so happy. He has not smiled like this since we were children." As the evening wore on, Nathan pulled Amelia aside, leading her out into the cool night air. Above them, the stars blazed brilliant and clear, and the mountains rose like silent witnesses to their joy. "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Jameson?" he asked, and the sound of her new name made her smile. "I am ready." They rode back to her cabin, which was now their cabin, Nathan's horse tied to the back of the wagon he had borrowed for the occasion. Inside, someone had left candles burning, and the small space glowed with warm light. Nathan lifted Amelia over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently. Then he took her face in his hands and kissed her with a passion that had been held in check during their courtship. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I will love you until my dying day." "I love you too," Amelia whispered back. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for staying." That night they came together as husband and wife, and Amelia discovered that physical love could be as beautiful and meaningful as the emotional connection they had built. Nathan was gentle and patient, attentive to her needs and her nervousness, and by the time they finally fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, Amelia felt completely safe, completely cherished, completely home. The first year of their marriage brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Nathan continued working at the Double R Ranch while they saved money, but he spent every moment he could at the cabin, improving the property and planning for their future. Together they expanded the garden, added a small barn for livestock, and acquired a milk cow and several pigs. Amelia sold eggs, vegetables, and butter in town, slowly building a reputation for quality goods. The money she earned went into their savings, added to Nathan's wages, building toward the dream of their own ranch. Winter came hard that year, with deep snows that isolated them for weeks at a time. But they were prepared, their larder stocked with preserved food from the garden, firewood stacked high, the animals sheltered and fed. During those long, cold nights, they huddled together by the fire, and Nathan taught Amelia to read maps and documents while she taught him to appreciate poetry and novels. They talked about their future, about the children they hoped to have, about the land they wanted to buy. "I was thinking about the section east of here," Nathan said one snowy evening, a map spread across his lap. "It has good water access from the creek, decent grazing land and timber for building. The owner is getting old, might be willing to sell at a fair price." Amelia leaned over his shoulder studying the map. "How much land?" 320 acres. "We could run cattle, horses, keep enough cleared for farming, build a proper house, not just a cabin." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I know it is a lot to take on. It will mean years of hard work, scraping by while we build everything from scratch. But I truly believe we could make it something special." "I believe it too," Amelia said. She had learned to trust Nathan's judgment, but more than that, she had learned to trust in their partnership. Together they were stronger than either could be alone, and what seemed impossible for one person became achievable for two. "We have already built so much. A ranch is just the next step." By spring, Nathan had approached the landowner and negotiated a purchase price. It would take every cent they had saved plus a loan from the bank in IRA, but it was doable. The papers were signed in March of 1884, and suddenly they were landowners, possessors of a dream that felt almost too big to comprehend. The existing cabin on the property was even smaller than Amelia's original home, barely more than a shed, but they did not care. They had land, they had each other, and they had a vision. The work began immediately. Nathan quit his job at the Double R Ranch, grateful to his boss but ready to pursue his own dream, and threw himself into building their ranch. With help from friends and neighbors, he constructed a barn first, knowing that the livestock had to be properly sheltered before they could invest in more. Amelia worked alongside him, hauling lumber, hammering nails, doing whatever needed doing. Her hands, already calloused from hauling water, grew even tougher, but she did not mind. Every board they placed, every nail they drove, was a piece of their future taking shape. By summer, they had a functional barn and had acquired their first cattle, a small herd of 20 head purchased from a rancher looking to reduce his stock. Nathan also bought 2 horses, beautiful bay mares with good bloodlines, planning to start a breeding program. Amelia continued her egg and vegetable business, now expanded with a larger garden plot irrigated from the creek. Money was tight. Every penny counted and allocated carefully, but they were making progress. In August, Amelia realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first she thought it was stress or the hard physical labor, but when a second month passed and she began feeling queasy in the mornings, she knew. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex swirl of emotions: joy, fear, excitement, anxiety. They were barely scraping by as it was. How would they manage with a baby? She told Nathan that evening as they sat on the porch of their small cabin, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of rose and gold. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit up with pure delight, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, needing to hear the words. "Happy, Amelia, I am over the moon." Terrified, yes, but so incredibly happy. He pulled back to look at her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "We will figure it out. We have faced everything else together. We will face this too." The pregnancy progressed through fall and into winter. Amelia's body changed, her belly swelling with their child, and Nathan treated her like precious glass. Constantly worried she was working too hard. She found his protectiveness endearing even when it frustrated her, and they learned to negotiate, finding a balance between her need to contribute and his need to keep her safe. On a bitter cold night in February of 1885, Amelia went into labor. Nathan had arranged for a midwife from town to stay with them as her time approached, and the woman proved invaluable as the contractions grew stronger and closer together. Labor lasted 12 hours, 12 hours of pain and fear, and Nathan holding her hand, his face pale but his presence steady. Finally, as dawn broke pink and gold across the snowy landscape, their son was born. Nathan cried when the midwife placed the baby in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny red-faced creature they had created. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Amelia, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Nathan's father, and the baby became the center of their universe. Those first weeks were exhausting, endless cycles of feeding and changing, and trying to sleep whenever the baby slept. But there were moments of transcendent joy too, like when Thomas first smiled at them, or when Nathan fell asleep in the rocking chair with his son on his chest, both of them peaceful and content. Spring brought new challenges. They had to manage the ranch while caring for an infant, and there were days when Amelia felt pulled in a dozen directions at once. But Nathan never complained, never suggested that she was not doing enough. Instead, he took on more of the physical labor, working from dawn until well past dark, building the life he had promised her. Slowly, incrementally, the ranch began to take shape. The herd grew as calves were born. The horses were bred and foaled, producing strong, healthy youngsters that would be their foundation stock. The garden flourished under Amelia's care, providing food and income. By summer, they had saved enough to begin building a proper house. It would not be a mansion, but it would be solid and spacious, with room for their growing family and for the future they envisioned. Nathan drew up plans, and with help from neighbors, construction began. The house rose slowly over the course of the summer and fall, frame by frame, board by board. Amelia could see their future taking physical shape, and it filled her with a satisfaction deeper than anything she had known. In October, they moved into the new house, though parts of it were still unfinished. The main living area was done, with a proper kitchen and a bedroom for them and a smaller room for Thomas. The fireplace Nathan had built drew well, filling the space with warmth, and the windows let in light that made everything feel open and hopeful. On their first night in the new house, Nathan carried her over the threshold again, laughing, and they christened their new bedroom with passion and joy. "You remember that first day?" Nathan asked afterward as they lay tangled together in the darkness. "When I found you walking that road with those buckets, I remember thinking you were crazy," Amelia admitted. "Offering to dig a well for a stranger, I kept waiting for you to reveal what you really wanted. And what did I want? This." She gestured around them, encompassing the house, the ranch, the life they had built. "You, me, us. You wanted to build something real and lasting, and you did." Nathan kissed her forehead. "We did. It was never just me, Amelia. Everything we have, we built together." The years that followed were good ones, marked by hard work and steady progress. The ranch became known for quality cattle and horses, and Nathan's reputation as an honest, fair dealer brought customers from across the territory. Amelia's garden and egg business continued to thrive, and she began making cheese from their cow's milk, selling it in town where it became highly sought after. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. In 1887, Amelia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Margaret after Amelia's mother. She had her mother's dark hair and Nathan's gray eyes, and from the moment she entered the world with a lusty cry, she made it clear she would not be overlooked. Thomas, now 2, was fascinated by his baby sister, and Nathan doted on both children with a devotion that made Amelia's heart swell. The house was finished by then, expanded to include a real parlor and 2 additional bedrooms, anticipating the larger family they hoped to have. Amelia furnished it slowly, carefully choosing pieces that were both practical and beautiful, creating a home that felt warm and welcoming. She hung curtains she had sewn herself, placed braided rugs on the floors, and lined the shelves with books. The house became a gathering place for neighbors and friends, a symbol of what could be achieved through determination and love. In 1889, their third child was born, another son they named Samuel. He was a quiet baby, easier than his siblings, and he fit into their family as if there had always been a space waiting for him. Nathan built onto the house again, adding more room, and joked that at this rate they would have a mansion by the time they were old. Amelia laughed and told him she would not complain. The ranch continued to grow. They expanded their cattle herd to over 200 head, purchased more land adjacent to their original property, and built a second barn to accommodate their growing operation. Nathan hired seasonal help during roundup and branding, but mostly they managed on their own, a family enterprise built on sweat and sacrifice and unwavering commitment. Life was not without its difficulties. There were years when drought threatened the grazing land, and they had to carefully manage their herd size. There were harsh winters that took a toll on the livestock and required constant vigilance to prevent losses. There were illnesses, accidents, and the endless small crises that came with ranching. But Nathan and Amelia faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. In 1891, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. It seemed impossible that a decade had passed since that October day when they had pledged their lives to each other in the small church in Auray. Nathan arranged for a neighbor to watch the children, and he took Amelia into town for a dinner at the hotel restaurant, a rare extravagance. Over roasted chicken and wine, they toasted their years together and the future still ahead. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Amelia said, her hand clasped in Nathan's across the table. "That day you found me on the road, I was so tired, so ready to give up. And then you appeared, offering to dig a well, and everything changed." Nathan raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "You changed my life too. I was just drifting before I met you, working for someone else's dream. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something lasting. I look at our ranch, our children, this life we have created, and I am in awe of what we have accomplished." "We have been blessed," Amelia agreed, "but we also worked for every bit of it. We earned this, Nathan, together." They returned home late that night, and the children were asleep when they checked on them. Thomas at 7 already showing signs of his father's build and temperament, Margaret at 4 a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, and Samuel at 2 still a sweet, cuddly baby. Looking at them, Amelia felt her heart might burst with love and gratitude. These were gifts she had never thought she would have, treasures born from the moment she had trusted a cowboy's offer to dig her a well. The years continued to unfold, each one adding depth and richness to their story. In 1893, Amelia gave birth to twins, a boy and girl they named Joseph and Grace. The pregnancy had been difficult, and the birth even more so, but mother and babies came through healthy and strong. The house was full now, constantly loud and chaotic and wonderful. Nathan built yet another addition, creating more bedrooms, and joked that they were running out of land to build on. The ranch prospered beyond their initial dreams. Nathan's horses gained a reputation throughout Colorado and beyond, and he regularly sold breeding stock at premium prices. The cattle operation provided steady income, and Amelia's various enterprises, now including a substantial garden market business and a thriving cheese production, added significantly to their wealth. They were able to hire permanent hands to help with the work, giving them more time with their family. In 1895, the territory was moving toward statehood, already achieved in 1876, but still settling into its identity. And there was talk of extending the railroad through their region. Nathan attended town meetings, advocating for routes that would benefit local ranchers, and his voice carried weight in the community. He had become a respected figure, known for his integrity and his commitment to helping others, traits that Amelia knew had their roots in his own experience of being helped when he needed it most. Thomas, now 10, was already working alongside his father, learning the ranching trade with an eagerness that made Nathan proud. Margaret, at 8, showed an unexpected talent for working with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish foals with patience and kindness. Samuel, at 6, was the thinker, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. The twins, at 2, were just beginning to show their distinct personalities, Joseph bold and adventurous, Grace more cautious and observant. One evening in late summer, as the whole family sat on the wide porch Nathan had built years ago, watching the sun set over their land, Amelia leaned her head on her husband's shoulder and whispered, "Do you ever think about that first well?" Nathan's arm came around her, pulling her close. "I think about it all the time. That well was the beginning of everything, was it not? I dug down into the earth searching for water, but what I found was so much more. I found you, I found us, I found my whole life. You gave me water," Amelia said softly. "But more than that, you gave me hope when I had none left. You saw me struggling, and instead of riding past, instead of assuming someone else would help, you stopped. You committed yourself to making my life better, and you never wavered. That well was not just about water, Nathan. It was about one person seeing another's need and doing something about it. It was about love, Nathan said. I did not recognize it at first, but I was already falling in love with you even then, watching your courage and determination. Everything I did because I could not bear the thought of you suffering when I had the power to help. The children played in the yard, their laughter ringing out in the clear evening air, and Amelia watched them with a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was her life now, this abundance of love and family and purpose. The girl who had walked 10 miles a day carrying water, whose shoulders had been bent under the weight of survival, had become a woman who owned a thriving ranch, who had 5 healthy children, who loved and was loved with a depth that still sometimes took her breath away. In the years that followed, the ranch continued to evolve. Thomas took on more responsibility, effectively becoming Nathan's partner in the operation. Margaret developed such skill with horses that they started a formal training program, breaking and training horses for sale throughout the region. Samuel, showing academic inclination, spent hours with the books Amelia ordered from Denver, and they began talking about sending him to university when he was old enough. The twins grew into energetic, joyful children who brought laughter and chaos in equal measure. Nathan and Amelia grew older together, their bodies showing the marks of hard work and time, but their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, becoming something solid and unshakable, a foundation upon which everything else in their lives was built. They still made time for each other, still talked late into the night, still reached for each other with the same need and tenderness that had marked their early days. In 1900, as the new century dawned, they stood together on their land and looked back at everything they had built. The original cabin where Amelia had lived alone was still there, now used for storage, and the well Nathan had dug still provided water, though they had drilled additional wells to serve the expanded ranch. The house had been expanded so many times it was almost a different structure, rambling and comfortable, filled with the evidence of their life together. 18 years, Nathan said, his arm around Amelia's waist. 18 years since I dug that well. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times, I can barely remember what my life was like before you. I cannot remember life before you, Amelia said truthfully. Oh, I remember the facts, the events, but the feeling of it has faded. This is my life. This has always been my life. You and me and our children and this land. Do you have any regrets? She turned to look at him, seeing the man he had become, still strong despite the silver threading his dark hair, still handsome, still hers. Not a single one, do you? Never. He kissed her, soft and sweet, a kiss that held the weight of nearly 2 decades of partnership and love. I would dig that well 1,000 times over if it meant finding you at the end. The new century brought changes. The railroad did come through, transforming our Ray from a small mining town into a more substantial community. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, though Nathan swore he would stick with horses until his dying day. The children grew and began making their own paths. Thomas married a girl from town, and they built a house on ranch land Nathan deeded to them, continuing the legacy. Margaret shocked everyone by deciding to enter her horses in rodeo competitions, and she won more often than not, becoming something of a local celebrity. Samuel did go to university, studying engineering, but he returned every summer to help on the ranch, unable to stay away from the land that had shaped him. The twins, Joseph and Grace, were still young, still finding their ways, but they had the advantage of growing up in a stable, loving home, surrounded by examples of what hard work and dedication could achieve. In 1905, Amelia gave birth one more time, a surprise late-life baby they named Daniel. The pregnancy was harder than the others, and the birth left her weak for months afterward, but she recovered, and Daniel became the baby of the family, adored and somewhat spoiled by his older siblings. Nathan, now in his late 40s, found renewed energy in this late fatherhood, carrying Daniel everywhere, teaching him about the ranch from the time he could walk. As the years rolled on, the ranch became more than just their home. It became a legacy, a symbol of what could be achieved when two people committed themselves fully to each other and to a shared vision. They employed dozens of people over the years, and Nathan made sure to treat each one fairly, paying decent wages and providing good working conditions. He never forgot that he had once been a hired hand himself, dependent on someone else's generosity and fairness. Amelia continued her various enterprises well into her 40s, finally scaling back only when her body insisted on slowing down. But even then, she remained actively involved in the ranch's operations, her sharp mind and good judgment making her an invaluable partner to Nathan. They made all major decisions together, weighing options and consequences, trusting each other's instincts. In 1910, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, a milestone that seemed both impossible and inevitable. The whole family gathered, along with friends and neighbors from all over the county, for a celebration at the ranch. There was food and music and dancing, and as the sun set, Nathan took Amelia's hand and led her away from the crowd, back to the place where he had dug that first well. The wellhead was weathered now, the wood silvered by sun and age, but it still functioned, still drew sweet cold water from deep beneath the earth. Nathan pulled up a bucket and offered Amelia a dipperful. She drank, the water tasting exactly as it had that first time, when he had announced that they had found water and she had cried with relief. 25 years ago I asked you to marry me, Nathan said. I promised I would spend my life building a future with you, and I have tried every single day to keep that promise. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible, Amelia. You have given me children, a home, a purpose. You have been my partner in every sense of the word, working beside me, dreaming with me, facing every challenge without complaint. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Amelia set down the dipper and took his face in her hands. I have told you many times that you dug me a well and gave me water, but the truth is so much bigger than that. You gave me back my life, Nathan. You gave me hope and love and a future I could not have imagined. You took a woman who was broken and barely surviving, and you saw someone worth saving, worth loving, worth building a life with. Everything good in my life stems from that choice you made, to stop and help instead of riding past. I love you with every part of me, and I will love you until my last breath. They kissed there by the old well as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their first declaration of love, their wedding vows. Around them, the ranch hummed with life, with family and friends and celebration, but for that moment, they were alone with their history and their love. The years that followed continued to be full. Grandchildren began arriving as Thomas and then Margaret married and started families of their own. The ranch remained prosperous, weathering economic downturns and market fluctuations through careful management and diversification. Nathan and Amelia gradually stepped back from day-to-day operations, turning more responsibility over to Thomas and the hired managers, but they remained involved, offering guidance and wisdom earned through decades of experience. In 1915, as the world outside their Colorado Valley grew increasingly troubled with the war in Europe, the ranch stood as a place of stability and peace. The family had grown to include 13 grandchildren, and the house was constantly full of noise and laughter. Nathan and Amelia sat on their porch most evenings watching the children play, marveling at the legacy they had created. "Do you remember how alone you felt?" Nathan asked one evening, his hand clasped in hers. "That day I found you carrying water. I was alone," Amelia said. "Completely alone in the world. And then you came along and changed everything. You know what amazes me most? It would have been so easy for you to ride past. You were not obligated to help. You did not know me. But you stopped anyway, and that choice rippled out through both our lives, creating all of this." She gestured at the ranch, the family, the life they had built. "I think about that sometimes," Nathan admitted. "What would have happened if I had not stopped? Where would you be? Where would I be?" "I do not know where I would be," Amelia said quietly. "But I suspect I would not have survived much longer. I was at the end of my strength, Nathan. Another few months of walking those miles every day, and I think my body would have just given out. You did not just improve my life. You saved it." "And you saved mine," Nathan said. "Maybe not in such an immediate way, but you gave me a reason to dream, to build, to become more than I was. Before you, I was just drifting. After you, I had purpose." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. They were in their 60s now, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work, but their minds were sharp, and their love was as strong as ever. They had built something that would outlast them, a legacy that would continue through their children and grandchildren, a testament to what two people could achieve when they faced life together. In 1918, Samuel returned from the war in Europe, thank God unharmed, and announced his intention to stay on the ranch permanently. He had seen enough of the wider world and wanted nothing more than to be home, to work the land alongside his father and brother, to be part of the family enterprise. Nathan welcomed him with open arms, grateful to have another son involved in the ranch, grateful that Samuel had come home safe when so many had not. The decade that followed was marked by prosperity and growth. The ranch expanded again, acquiring adjacent properties as neighbors retired or moved on. The cattle operation evolved with the times, incorporating new breeding techniques and management practices. The horse training program that Margaret had started became regionally renowned, attracting customers from across the West. The family enterprise that Nathan and Amelia had built from nothing had become a substantial operation, employing over 50 people and supporting multiple families. Through it all, Nathan and Amelia remained the heart of it, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They moved more slowly now, their bodies finally demanding that they acknowledge their age, but their partnership had only grown stronger. They still talked for hours, still shared their thoughts and dreams, still reached for each other in the darkness. Their love had evolved from the passionate urgency of youth into something deeper and more profound, a connection so complete that they often did not need words to communicate. In 1925, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. The family threw an enormous party, inviting everyone they had ever known, it seemed. People came from all over Colorado and beyond, testimony to the lives Nathan and Amelia had touched. There were speeches and toasts, stories and laughter, and through it all, Nathan and Amelia sat together, their hands clasped, their hearts full. As the celebration wound down and guests began departing, their children and grandchildren gathered around them on the porch. Thomas, now a man of 40 with silver in his hair and children of his own, raised a glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have shown us what true partnership looks like, what it means to build a life based on love and respect and unwavering commitment. You took nothing and made it into something extraordinary. You faced every challenge together and never gave up. You have given us the greatest gift possible, a foundation of love and stability from which we could all grow. We love you both more than words can say." The family echoed his toast, glasses raised, and Nathan and Amelia looked around at these people they had created and raised and loved. This legacy that would continue long after they were gone. It was overwhelming in the best possible way, a validation of every choice they had made, every sacrifice they had endured, every moment of doubt they had overcome. That night, lying in bed in the house they had built together, Nathan turned to Amelia in the darkness. "I need you to know something," he said softly. "If I had my life to live over again, knowing everything I know now, I would not change a single thing. Every moment has led us here, to this life, to this love. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Amelia Jameson, and I thank God every day that I decided to stop and help a woman carrying water." Amelia rolled toward him, her hand finding his face in the darkness. "And I thank God every day that you were the kind of man who stopped, who saw someone struggling and chose to help. You dug me a well, Nathan, but more than that, you built me a life. You gave me everything I never dared to dream of, and I will be grateful every day I have left on this earth." They kissed, tender and sweet, a reaffirmation of vows spoken 40 years ago and renewed every day since. Outside, the ranch slept, peaceful under the stars. The well Nathan had dug still provided water, still served its purpose, a tangible symbol of the moment that had changed two lives forever. The land stretched out around them, hundreds of acres now, all of it a testimony to what could be built when two people loved each other and worked toward a common goal. The years continued to pass, each one precious, each one filled with the simple joys of family and work and love. Nathan and Amelia became great-grandparents, delighting in the newest generation, watching their legacy expand and evolve. They moved even more slowly now, their bodies finally giving in to age, but their minds remained clear, and their love remained constant. In the spring of 1930, Nathan became ill. It started as a simple cold but progressed into pneumonia, and despite the best efforts of doctors and family, he grew weaker. Amelia never left his side, holding his hand, talking to him, reminding him of their life together. The children gathered, understanding that the end was near, and the house filled with quiet grief. On a soft April evening, with his wife holding his hand and his children surrounding him, Nathan Jameson passed peacefully from this world. His last words were to Amelia, a whisper that only she could hear. "Thank you for the best life a man could ask for. I will wait for you, my love. However long it takes, I will wait." Amelia held him as he slipped away, tears streaming down her face, her heart breaking even as she knew he was at peace. They had had 45 years together, 45 years of love and partnership and joy. It was more than many people got, more than she had ever thought possible for the lonely woman carrying water all those years ago. But still, it was not enough. It would never be enough. Nathan was buried on the ranch, on a hill overlooking the land they had built together. The funeral was attended by hundreds, people whose lives he had touched, people who had benefited from his kindness and integrity. The stories people shared painted a picture of a man who had never forgotten where he came from, who had helped countless others the way he had once been helped, who had built a life based on love and principle and hard work. Amelia survived him by 3 years, Years she spent surrounded by family, watching the ranch continue to thrive under her children's management, taking comfort in the legacy she and Nathan had created. She spent hours sitting by his grave, talking to him, telling him about the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, knowing he heard her somehow. She never remarried, never even considered it. Nathan had been her one great love, and she had no desire to replace or diminish that. In the autumn of 1933, as the aspen leaves turned gold on the mountains, and the air carried the first hint of winter cold, Amelia Foster Jameson passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 71 years old, and she had lived a life beyond anything she could have imagined in those desperate days before Nathan found her. Her last conscious thought was of him, of the cowboy who had stopped to help a woman carrying water, who had dug her a well and built her a life and loved her with a devotion that had never wavered. She was buried beside Nathan on the hill, and at her funeral, attended by an even larger crowd than had gathered for his, their children spoke of the extraordinary partnership their parents had shared, the love that had been the foundation of everything good in their lives. Thomas, now 68 himself, stood beside his parents' graves and told the story one more time, the story of how a cowboy had seen a woman struggling and had stopped to help, how that simple act of kindness had blossomed into love and partnership, and a legacy that would continue for generations. The ranch continued under the management of the children and grandchildren, each generation adding their own contributions while honoring the foundation Nathan and Amelia had laid. The original well, the one Nathan had dug with his own hands over 50 years before, was preserved and maintained, a monument to the beginning of everything. Visitors to the ranch were always shown the well, always told the story of how it had come to be, how one man's compassion and one woman's courage had combined to create something extraordinary. Years passed, then decades, and the story became legend, passed down through the family and throughout the community. The Jameson Ranch prospered into the modern era, adapting to changing times but never losing sight of the values Nathan and Amelia had instilled, the principles of hard work and integrity and compassion for others. Every generation learned the story of the well, of the cowboy and the woman carrying water, of the love that had built everything they enjoyed. The well still stands today, carefully preserved, a testament to a moment that changed 2 lives and rippled out to touch hundreds more. It serves as a reminder that a single act of kindness can transform everything, that seeing another's struggle and choosing to help can create a legacy that outlasts any individual life. Nathan and Amelia's love story, born from desperation and compassion, grew into something that shaped not just their own lives but the lives of everyone who came after them. On the hill where they are buried together, a simple marker tells their story in brief. But the real monument is the ranch itself, the land they claimed and tamed and made productive, the family they created and nurtured, the values they embodied and passed down. Every fence post, every barn, every field of cattle grazing peacefully under the Colorado sun stands as testimony to what 2 people can build when they face life together, when love and partnership form the foundation of every decision. The woman who once walked 10 miles each day carrying water on her shoulders, who thought she would die alone and forgotten in a cabin on a ridge, instead lived a life of abundance and love. The cowboy who stopped to help, who dug a well with his own hands simply because he saw someone who needed help, found not just a purpose but a partner, a love that sustained him through every challenge and gave meaning to every day. Together, they proved that the simplest acts of kindness can have profound consequences, that love built on mutual respect and shared effort can withstand any storm, and that a life well lived leaves ripples that continue long after the individual is gone. Their story endures not because it was extraordinary in the dramatic sense, but because it was extraordinary in its ordinariness. They were simply two people who found each other, who chose to build something together, who faced life's challenges with courage and grace. They worked hard, loved deeply, raised their children well, and treated others with kindness. In doing so, they created a legacy that continues to inspire, a reminder that anyone can build something meaningful if they are willing to work for it, and if they have someone to share the journey. The well Nathan dug in the summer of 1882 still draws water from deep beneath the earth, sweet and cold and pure. It served its practical purpose for decades, providing the water that allowed Amelia to survive and eventually thrive. But its true purpose was always greater than simple hydration. It was a symbol, a beginning, a moment when one life reached out to touch another and everything changed. It was proof that sometimes the most profound transformations start with the simplest gestures, that a helping hand extended at the right moment can redirect the entire course of a life. Nathan and Amelia's children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and beyond carry forward the values they embodied, the lessons they taught through example. The ranch continues to operate, adapting to each new generation while maintaining its core identity as a place built on love and hard work. And always, at the heart of everything, is the story of the well, of the cowboy who dug it and the woman who needed it, of the love that grew from that moment and blossomed into something that touched countless lives. Their story is a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life, that seeing another's need and choosing to act can create ripples that extend far beyond what we can imagine. Nathan did not set out to create a legacy when he stopped to help Amelia. He simply saw someone who needed water and knew he could provide it. But that simple act, rooted in compassion and carried out with dedication, became the foundation for everything that followed. And so the well stands, weathered but enduring, a monument to a love story that began with water and grew into something that nourished not just two people but generations. It stands as proof that the best things in life often come from the simplest beginnings, that love can transform everything, and that a life built on partnership and mutual support can create a legacy that truly matters. Nathan dug Amelia a well, but together they built a life, and that life continues to echo through time, a testament to what is possible when two people choose to face the world together, hand in hand, heart to heart, forever.